All right.
Welcome to Review Preview. I'm Pastor Mark.
And I'm Pam Bentley.
It's good to have you all with us this evening. Again, this is our weekly get-together. Pam and I have a conversation about last week's sermon.
Right.
And then we have a look at the upcoming sermon that we review, and then we
Preview.
that's how it works. So
Yeah.
it's good to have you with us. I see we have some folks checking in. Welcome. Good to see you. As always, your questions and comments are welcomed and encouraged. Our platform allows you to do that, so feel free to write questions or make comments. And towards the end of our time together, we're going to spend about 15, 20 minutes talking. And towards the end of that time, we'll take a look to see if there are any questions that we need to answer. So Pam, let's talk. We're in this series on love.
Sure,
Again,
yeah.
We're almost done. This coming Sunday will be the final message in the series. But we've been looking at what it means to love.
Right.
The specific activities involved in loving well. And we've been using the book by Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages, sort of as a basis to help us with that. And also applying that, looking at that book, and then also looking at specific scripture passages, especially those passages related to the life of Jesus, which I think Jesus was the best at communicating love and teaching us how to love. And so that's what we've been doing in this series.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Last week, we continued looking at one of the skills needed to love well. We looked at the skill of acts of service.
Right. Yeah, acts of service. So important, and so many good points that you make. And you say, looking at the scripture to see, how did Jesus show that? And, we looked at the passage where he's washing the disciples' feet. And, so important to see that, what a dirty job that was. You mentioned that in your sermon. Like, of all the things that you could do, washing their feet, just a nasty job, right? But you have to say, all along his teaching, Jesus was always saying, look at me, do what I do as I do.
Right.
Watch me, and then do as I do. Watch how I pray, and pray as I pray. I will teach you how to do that, right? So, Jesus never asked anyone to do something that he wasn't going to do himself.
Right.
And so,
Great leadership.
important to see that, right?
Yeah.
That of any job, he would get down to the dirtiest job there was to show that don't ever think that you are above this.
And that's so counterintuitive, especially in the culture where Jesus was ministering at the time.
Yeah.
The first century Hebrew culture, it was a very stratified society, and certain people are at the top and certain people are at the bottom. And it was based on your gender, your family, those sorts of things. And so to wash somebody's feet was a job reserved for the low end of the spectrum. And for Jesus, the Son of God, to do that for his disciples was really something no one would have expected, especially the disciples.
Right. And I think even today in some ways, we can get caught up in thinking that we are better because we may have more money than someone, or we may have a better title than someone, or whatever it might be. We can use that as a reason to think that those jobs are below us, or doing that service is below us. And yet it's a great reminder that that we all need to serve in that way.
And there are so many opportunities to serve all around us. And we talked about that in the message last week, the different ways we can serve, the little things we can do, like making a meal for somebody, or running errands for somebody, or chaperoning for your child's field trip at school, all kinds of things. Really, if we notice some need and seek to fill it, that's a good thing. But I was thinking about this. The challenge is to figure out when to not serve, when to when can you say no to something so that serving is great and we're supposed to serve and we're supposed to serve sacrificially.
Right, right, right.
But you also need to take care of yourself and you need to take time for yourself and you need to have healthy boundaries.
I think that's it, right. You
Yeah.
do have to be aware of that, about those boundaries of when is it too much for you? And I think it's, you have to be intuitive to yourself of when you
Yeah.
start to feel that. If you start to feel resentment about
Yeah.
that, I think that's a time to take a step back. If you start to feel that you're being manipulated, if
Yeah.
you start to notice then that becomes a sign of, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's different than the act of service out of love. If you feel like there's some sort of manipulation in why you're doing that, that's
Yeah.
something to take notice of.
And sometimes we get bitter or resentful when we're serving, not because we're doing too much or because we feel forced into it, but rather because we've forgotten why we're doing it. Sometimes we forget, I'm doing this because I want to demonstrate love.
Right.
I know
Yeah.
as a pastor in a church and you working in the church too, you can come across people who volunteer to serve out of a great love for God and they're excited about it. And then over time, if they don't keep their heart in the right place, they can start getting resentful about their service, or they can start feeling like nobody appreciates what I
Right.
do. I'm not getting a lot of thanks or pats on the back and that sort of thing. So we have to, on the one hand, avoid other people manipulating us and us, because we're afraid to say no sometimes, we don't set reasonable boundaries. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we have to be very cognizant of the attitude we cultivate while we serve.
Right, yeah. It's interesting. Gary Chapman also wrote a book of the love languages for kids and for
right.
teenagers. And in those books, he references how, sometimes we can wish that our kids or our teenagers would do acts of service and have a more of a better heart about why
Right,
they're
right,
doing it,
right.
right? And yet, Gary Chapman encourages parents to say, be patient and take time to teach your children how to do some of these acts of service,
yeah.
and let that be an act of service out of love to teach your child how to wash the car, to teach
Yeah.
your child how to mow the lawn, to teach
Yeah.
your child how to cook something. Like, take that time to do that, to show them how to do those acts of service, knowing that maybe in the now their attitude may not be what you
Right,
hope it's
right.
going to be, but knowing that long term you're teaching them a great skill, you're teaching them how to love well. So
What a
I
great
think that's
point.
a great point to because I know a lot of us parents it is a struggle, and you think, I want you to go do your laundry, I don't want to do it for you, but
Right.
but it takes that time to teach them
Yeah.
how to do it,
Do it together,
and do
sure.
it together, and do that, and know that that is an act of service out of love, showing love to your child that way too.
Yeah.
That spending, doing that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
yeah.
love what you're doing with our youth in youth ministry, getting them involved in acts of service in our community. I know last week you went
Right.
and helped at a local food distribution place
Right,
here.
we were out at the food pantry at the gathering at Scott Memorial UMC, and serving together is a great way to get to know somebody. Even you have that shared experience, and so you're not only serving, you're serving the community, you're giving out of love, but then there's just like a bonding experience that kind of happens when you're with other people for that same common purpose of helping to serve others. And so, at the drive-through food pantry, there were over 1,200 people that were served through the food that was distributed, and in a safe way. It was a really
Good.
well-run thing. So, and the students are wanting to go back, so we're gonna continue to do that. But
that's good.
serving together. It's a great way. I may not know you, but yet spending that time serving together, it's an experience that does bring you together.
And it's an
Yeah.
expression of God's love in our community.
Right,
So thank
right.
you all for doing that.
Right,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so let's shift gears now. We talked about acts of service last week. This coming week, we're going to be wrapping up this series by talking about the importance of quality time.
Right, yes.
Quality time, investing time with those we love. You've heard that expression, love is spelled Time. And it takes time to love. And, what I talk about this coming week is the need to practice two disciplines, personal disciplines, if we're going to find and invest quality time in our key relationships. And the first discipline is that of prioritizing, right? Setting priorities, because time is a finite resource. So you have to spend it, invest it wisely and well, and that means you got to prioritize.
Right.
And we get 168 hours in a week, and that sounds like a lot, but when you think, well, if you've got a job, if you want 8 hours of sleep a night or 7 hours of sleep a night, and you got other things you're doing that are part of your weekly routine, that 168 hours gets eaten up pretty quick.
Right, it goes quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have to decide what you're going to say no to in order to say yes to those vitally important relationships.
Right.
And one of the things I've noticed that can happen over time is we will start to say yes to other things and even lesser relationships. And in doing so, we start to sacrifice the most important relationships. And so we need to periodically remember, I have made relational commitments. If you're married, that's a relational commitment. If you have children, that's a relational commitment.
Right.
And if you're part of an extended family, maybe there are certain people I've already committed to being in a love relationship with. And so to identify those relationships and say, these are going to be the primary. It's not that you can't have a bunch of friends and acquaintances and go, do things with other people, but the primary focus of our investment of quality time needs to be with those primary relationships.
It's a great reminder, because I think sometimes we it's so easy, I think, to take those primary relationships for granted.
Yes.
We think that because we are close, because they're a primary relationship with us, I don't know that they'll understand if I need to go spend some time doing this or that, or whatever it might be, and yet before we know it, we've really let that relationship go, and it's we have to be the ones to make that a priority.
A lot of times, relationships don't just suddenly break apart.
Right.
They gradually fall apart.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they gradually fall apart is because we're not investing the quality time we need to. Jesus was a master at this. I mean, you think about it, Jesus had a very public ministry. He was very busy. He was around people all the time, but he had his inner circle, his 12. And he spent extra special quality time with the 12. And you can read in the Gospels where he'd take them off on retreats. He'd go have meals with them. He'd spend time just with them, and he would invest quality time in them. He loved everyone, but he was deeply committed to spending quality time with those 12.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, in preparing for the sermon, I came across research that points out the average person has enough time, energy, and emotional bandwidth for about 8 to 12 really deep relationships.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not to say, again, we can't have other friendships, but it's so important. If we're going to prioritize the 168 hours in our week, we need to say, what are my 8 to 12 primary relationships, and make sure they get the quality time first rather than the leftovers.
Right, absolutely.
So Jesus was really good. And Jesus' relationship with the Heavenly Father was also something he prioritized. Got up early in the morning, went off to be alone with the Lord in prayer. He knew how to spend time with his Heavenly Father. On the Sabbath day, he would go with the worshiping community and worship. Making time for God is part of recognizing that's a primary relationship.
Right. And I don't know, a lot of us may not put that in that 8 to 12, right? But yet we need that. We need to spend that quality time and
what we often have done in Christian world, we've equated believing in God with loving God. And those are two different things.
Right?
Yes, we're supposed to believe in God, but the commandment is to love God. not just believing. I can believe in God and not love him at all. So to love God means many things, but one of the things it means is I'm going to have to invest some quality time in that relationship.
Right, and as we think about this whole series of the skill set, how if we think about this whole skill set of how does that relate to our primary relationship with God and loving God, well, what does that really look like? Spend some time to think about that, engaging in those acts of service to show love to other people, but also to show love to God, to those words of encouragement that you say to other people, but then do we take the time to share those words of encouragement with God, even to share those things.
So prioritizing is important,
Right,
because time is a finite resource. We've got to spend time with those most important relationships. And then the second discipline is planning. Planning the time. So it's not just, well, we've got a Saturday today, what are we going to do? But to actually plan out, what are we going to do together? I always tell couples, when you get married, carve out a date night once a week, hopefully. At least once every other week, but hopefully once a week. And I know it's hard when you have children. It was really interesting when Lynn and I were much younger and we had little kids at home. Lynn's parents would send us $100 a month. And they'd send it in a check, and they would say, this is not to pay bills and do other things. This is for you to have a couple of date nights.
That's great. What a great idea.
Pay for the babysitter, pay to go out to eat, And so we started doing that for our daughter and her husband, and when they started having kids.
That is a great
we
idea.
now send them $100 a month and say, only use it for date night.
That's great. So. Right. You say plan, and I'm a planner. I will plan things out. I will plan events and plan all these things. But when it comes to my own family, sometimes I don't plan the way that I would plan for work or what I do. I don't put the same level of energy into that, and it's a good reminder to that we need to set those things on the calendar, make that a priority, and carve out that time, because nobody's going to do that for us. We have to do that ourselves. We have to be the ones, talk about boundaries, like we have to be the ones to create those boundaries. We have to recognize that and have that forethought and plan ahead and make it happen, because it won't happen otherwise.
Become the fun planner. In your,
right.
I'm going to plan the fun. So I had a buddy once who had 3 young sons, and he had every Monday off, and so he called it Manly Mondays. And he and his boys would go do something manly, like go for a hike or go build a birdhouse, something. But he was always coming up with these things he could do with his 3 boys for Manly Monday. And I thought, that's a great idea.
That's great. That is good.
But it took planning.
Planning to do
and,
it, right.
Living here in the Tidewater area, there is so much.
There's a lot to go do, absolutely.
Hiking, biking, kayaking, museums, wineries, just go to the beach, all kinds of things. In his book, Dr. Chapman warns folks not to give in to the default temptation of, let's watch a movie, or let's watch a TV show. That can be fine to do sometimes, but his point, which I think is fair, is that if all your kind of fun time is spent sitting in a chair on a couch watching a screen, you're not interacting that much.
Right, there's not an interaction, and and it is about building memories. It's about that. It's about those shared experiences that are going to build memories. Our 2 daughters would laugh at this, but we would have Bentley Family Fun Days sometimes, right?
Go.
Bentley Family Fun Day, and usually Bentley Family Fun Day would involve some kind of outdoor, like we'd go hiking, we'd do something, and a lot of times we'd go hiking, and the girls would be kind of moaning and groaning as we were going. But now, as they're older now, they do. They remember Bentley Family Fun Day being being a great thing that we would do together, even though sometimes their attitude wasn't so great while we were there. But it made we do have those memories of being together, and that's what it is.
I know a family that every spring they had Olympics, Family Olympics.
Wow, that's some
And-
planning right there.
And
Wow.
Mom and Dad really got into it. They'd come up with all these crazy games you had to play, and they'd set it up, and you had to wear these really goofy hats while you played the game, and it was just, you know, and as the kids got older, exactly, oh, do we have to do that again this year? But now that the kids are adults, some of their best memories are
Right?
the Family
Yeah.
Olympics every spring.
That's
Yeah.
funny. That's great.
But again, taking time to plan, and there's books and there's resources to help us with that.
Right, and it could just be something simple, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
Family game night.
Right,
You
exactly.
don't have to spend a lot of money.
Right, right,
But be creative. Use resources.
Right.
There are books on 50 fun dates or
Right.
fun things to do. And gosh, there's a lot of local resources that'll say fun things to do in Tidewater.
Right,
or whatever.
right, absolutely.
So, but the point is, got to plan.
You do.
And I think one of the reasons maybe we don't have as much fun with our closest relationships is because we don't do fun things. We're tired all the time, we're preoccupied all the time because we haven't set the healthy boundaries, we haven't prioritized, and we're not planning to invest the time in those relationships.
Right. I think, we come home and that's our safe space to just kind of be and let go of whatever we may have been through the day and whatnot. And I think we all kind of need that. You need to have that time where you can just be, right?
You need veg out time.
Right.
Yeah.
You need that downtime, but yet, those who are living with us, or those relationships that we have, other people living in our houses with us and whatnot, they need to have that. We need to prioritize them to have those interactions with them too,
And I even find sometimes when I'm tired and weary, if I will force myself to go ahead and do something fun that I've planned, I get the energy back.
right. It
Once
does
you start
energize
going,
you.
you know,
Yes. Right.
Gosh, last thing I feel like doing is going putt-putt golfing with my kids.
But you go.
But once you get out there and start playing putt-putt golf, all of a sudden you're having a good time.
There
you
you
find your
go,
energy. You're doing
right?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway,
Yes.
so as we wrap up this series, I've tried, and I know you've tried in this series in our teaching times to talk about the theoretical, what is love, but then get to the very practical. Here's how you actually engage in the behaviors that love requires.
Right.
So that as I think I mentioned last week, we always hear in the church how important it is to love, how we're supposed to love each other, and yet we don't often hear, here's some 5 or 6 specific things you can do.
Right. It seems like such a lofty thing,
Right.
and we can have all kinds of connotations of that one word. It just seems very lofty, but yet knowing the skill set that we can have on how to actually put that into action is really important for us to remember and keep these in mind as we as we move past this series and just in life in general.
Because as we say, love is not primarily an emotion we feel, it is a skill set we develop.
Right,
And as we
something we
develop that
do.
skill, love flourishes and the feelings come along for the ride.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll check and see if we have any questions. Let's see. Here's one. Quick question. For you, Pam, what is your favorite thing to do with your family?
We play games. We play board games. We play card games. So yeah,
Are
we
you
play
competitive?
cribbage. There is a card game that we play. We are very competitive. Yes, in the card games. So yes, all kinds of board games.
Who's the sore loser in the family?
Not going to mention that, but
Good for you. You're smart. All right, good. All right. Another one. This one's about the prioritizing. What do I do if I have a hard time saying no to less important people in my life? Sometimes I feel like I'm getting pulled in many different directions. That's a common problem. And I hate to say it, you have to find polite ways of saying no. Well, one of the things I learned early on as a pastor is I would actually put in my calendar specific times for family. I mean, actually make an appointment. So that way,
Right.
if someone said, hey, can you meet on this night? Hey, can you go here? I said, oh, sorry, I've already got something on my calendar. And that's all I had to say.
Right. Somebody once said to me, sometimes you have to say no to other people because you need to say yes to yourself.
Yeah.
And such a good reminder. That's
Yeah.
a great idea to put it in your calendar, make it be
Yeah.
something that is just like you have scheduled a meeting with somebody else.
Right.
Schedule that.
Yeah. So, you know, if I were to say, hey, can you meet with some committee on Thursday night? You know, if you scheduled time, if that's your date night with your husband, you'd have every right to say, no, I've already got something booked that night, you know?
Right.
The same way if I said, you want to go to a meeting on Thursday afternoon, and you say, oh, I've got a dental appointment. An appointment is an appointment, right? And so
right.
that's not to say there aren't times when you have to cancel on
Balance
loved
that,
ones in
right.
order to do something else. But generally speaking, I find if I will put it on my calendar first, before everything starts making its demands, then I can fit other things in around it.
Right.
Yeah,
Good
so.
point.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in, and you have a good week, and we'll see you next week.